Welcome to the Mission Manhood podcast, where mature masculinity is celebrated and encouraged. My name is Angela Abide, and I will be your host. Every week or so, I sit down with a man who is in the men's movement, helping men grow and thrive in their masculinity, someone who is exhibiting characteristics of mature masculinity, or someone who has a perspective that might be beneficial for those who are seeking to grow and develop in that area. As a woman, I have a unique perspective as a mother and a therapist, and I hope to contribute to the conversation in those ways. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Hey, I'm glad you're here. In the last episode, I spoke with Corey Castillo about the father energy and the pursuit of an absolute truth that you're willing to look for despite the suffering that you might endure along the way. And it made me think of an interview that I had done with Evan Flory-Barnes back in February for the Deepening Place podcast. Evan tells the story of yearning to be an authentic, individually sovereign person and the journey that he's been on to get there. He is an artist, a musician, a philosopher, and his story is really inspiring because he stood his ground. He used the tools that he had acquired through doing some inner work, and he allowed himself to be transformed by that pursuit of an absolute truth. I think a willingness to see, to put your beliefs on the altar and have them be consumed by fire is painful, and losing people in that pursuit is painful. But in rising from the ashes, you'll know you're free. The truth will set you free. And that freedom is priceless. Hi, Evan.
Hello. How are you, Angela?
I'm great. I'm really happy to talk to you. I'm really intrigued by your content on Instagram. And just to start off, could you tell us about who you are and what your passions are?
Yes. So I'm Evan Flory-Barnes. I live in Seattle, Washington. I'm a musician. I play both bass guitar and electric upright bass, and I sing and write songs and orchestrate. And I've been involved in the arts and music across the board for the last 20 odd years or so. My interests are also just personal expression, self-expression, individual sovereignty, and that relationship to creativity and art and being. And I've also been into just looking into just the way human beings interact and relate, and looking at the things that obstruct that and get in the way. I think also for a long time I've been into various forms of philosophy, psychology, spirituality, and in a way kind of developing and honing my own voice there, as well as like coming up with a distinct way to express it as a lot of changes have happened.
When you're talking about individual sovereignty, I wondered, could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, over the last, I'd say 4 years, I had a drastic shift of my life, my community and relationships. That I've been working in the Seattle art music scene and playing elsewhere and getting around for a long time. And I had an ending of a relationship with someone that was in my community. And it turned out to be this sort of like insult to injury. Breakups are hard as they are, but when someone adds a smear campaign and blocks you and is telling lies about that, it's like what I went through was kind of a shattering of all these different things I thought, believed, and then I had these recognitions. And at that time, because I've always been into some form of like reflection, meditation, sort of inner work, if you want to call it that, for a long time. But I started therapy right before this breakup because I started to recognize, you can call it codependency, you can call it unhealthy obsession with others to the point where you're abandoning yourself. And so I started to recognize that theme and that insult to injury breakup, like, put that theme in my life, in my face, so I could not ignore it anymore. And so that like as a process that kind of broke all these different things about what I thought and what I believed, and I started to dive in, and then individual sovereignty and what that truly means, like on so many levels. Like, I think so much of what has been shaped, when I think about so many things, has to do with recognizing abuses that I was bypassing as just, oh, that's normal. I think in individual sovereignty, just recognizing that, to start to check into the things that one, into how you relate to others and what you allow into your life. You start to develop boundaries. I've also been really into this relationship with, narcissistic abuse recovery, codependency.
Yeah.
And when I started to just break all that stuff down, it also started to shift into this cultural, political awareness of kind of recognizing a certain level of things, almost like a kind of collective narcissistic codependent relationship, and starting to see that in life. And so as I started to define and really claim for myself what was important to me at a deeper level, because on some levels I feel like I was doing this at 18, 19, all through my 20s. And then there was something that happened that almost like in another relationship that pushed on these buttons that did a future relationship just put in my face. And so I think the freedom to be oneself freely, and in all ways, it can be powerfully, but it can also be with flaws. It's just the freedom to be oneself in an environment, and to claim oneself and to claim responsibility for one's actions and one's feelings and one's choices. Self ownership is another term, but it's just this idea of rooting more in oneself than being so, like as I was, so hyperly concerned with what others think or how others are going to feel, even at the detriment to oneself. And I think we're seeing. I think I've noticed this kind of rise of a collective codependency that is getting taken advantage of, and going through all the things I went through in personal relationships, I see it right away.
Well, one thing about individual sovereignty, and I don't hear a lot of people talking about it, that's why I think it just made me curious. That was one of the ideas when this nation was founded. We're going to give you all these freedoms, but you have to maintain your individual sovereignty and your ability to self-govern so that you can hold on to them. Well, and it always goes back to the idea of, in the Bible, the word becomes flesh. It's almost like our job is to allow our flesh to become the word. And when you go down and discover your true self, you're rising from the ashes, and then you have this thing to offer, and you rise up, and that's your truth. And I'm seeing some stuff, on your writing, like you're nervous, as I am, that our ability to express that is being threatened.
Absolutely.
So you do all this work, you go through all this, and you have something that's real and true. And then you come up to express it and to give this contribution to the world. And now they're going to say, oh, that's not politically correct, or that's not.
A moment where I tested my, sovereignty, because it's what I started to discover as I spent time with my therapist and started to just gain my sense of self is, you start to notice as you do that work, certain relationships and interactions, they stop feeling the same, or you start to notice, oh, this doesn't quite work anymore. And I was in this band for a long time, and I was finding myself, as I was kind of getting in touch with something essential, it not being satisfactory anymore, and for a number of reasons, and just kept getting these, red flags and warning signs. And then, so the year 2017 hit, and I started to kind of gain this sense of self, and I decided to do this show at a theater here in town called On the Boards, and it's a show called On Loving the Muse and Family. It's kind of like what I did is I took all my different. It's kind of combining like it's taking the old late 1950s, early 1960s variety show, but using examples of my own stories about life and creativity and relationships. And it was at this theater called On the Board in Seattle. It's like spent pretty much the whole year getting ready for it, and it was this big. I had like a 50-piece orchestra. I had a
Wow.
band called the True Loves. It was this my personal philosophy, my relational philosophy, my spiritual philosophy, and all out on stage, all out, and my love of music as a composer, as a bassist. And then I started to also explore, and kind of reclaim my, I used to do sketch comedy in college. And so there's that sort of aspect of theater. And it was, so all 2017 was getting ready to do that show. And then in 2018, almost 3 years ago to the day, I put the show up, and I did a song in like a Dean Martin style. I did a song in a Nat King Cole type of style. I wrote 2 country songs. One was a country breakup song, and then the other one was a song I wrote in the sort of beginning sweet time of the relationship with the person that did the smear campaign. That was, and it was really sweet because I went all out. I set up because it's all this orchestral music, but then for the country music, it strips down to just the lap steel, guy on acoustic guitar singing backups, and a guy on the fiddle, and and I'm playing upright bass and singing, and it creates this just beautiful moment. And so we do the show. We did 4 nights. It sold out every night. It was a beautiful experience. It was like one of those moments where this is what I envisioned, and it's happening. And then 2 days or a day after the show, I get this text from a guy who attends the show, and he's like, "Catching any flack, bro?" I'm like, "What?" Mind you, the day before that says, I haven't cried like that in a long time. Like, I was hearing stories about people being touched, moved, especially a lot of men being moved about just, there's something I tapped into about the masculine heart, you can call it whatever and because I heard a lot of stories about all kinds of people being impacted and moved, but particularly men.
It was everything that you had imagined it would be. Yeah. And you were getting all kinds of feedback from people who said it really deeply touched them, especially men.
Yes.
And then you get an out of random text from someone wondering if you'd caught any flack about it.
Yeah. And then I was like, what? And then I go to Facebook, and this person who I had to break up with about 2 years earlier, talking about the show is about her and demeans her, and it has nothing to do with her. But that song hints at things, but it doesn't. Creative license. One, people write songs about people who were dear for the longest time. I watched people that were my friends. People talk to me as if they hadn't known me for the past 15 years. And I saw the makings of the mind virus. It was startling at what was being said and what was being done. I stood my ground, and I said, no, I know what this work's about. I know the emotional work. I know the artistic work. I know I know my therapy bills. I know what I put into this work, and you're not going to tell me about what it means. Sorry.
Yeah.
But then I got to experience firsthand it, and it's like,
you mentioned the mind virus, and you say it's an environment of dependency, unhealthy self-obsession, and cognitive dissonance. And you also mention outrage addiction and media distortion. And it just made me think that, wow, something must have really happened to give you this insight. And so it's interesting to hear you tell that story, that
yes,
it happened to you.
It's so interesting because it's like it happened with the thing dearest to me, which is my music and my work. And I think what that did is, again, it kind of, this time, instead of being sent into the slow tailspin where everything kind of slowed down in one way, I felt like I stood my ground. I felt like all the tools I garnered in 2 years before that show, I got to use, and I got to be like, well, we're done. A couple of guys of the of the band that I was in, that I was getting all these red flags from that I shouldn't be in anymore. I was like, well, that's it. If you're going to side with that. And it was very cut and dry. And there was something very empowering about that. But even when you lose the most unhealthy or even unsupportive people that have been a regular stance in your life, there's still a grieving. So I went through that. But then I also kind of strength of character. And I started to see the thing that I went through, observe it politically.
Earlier when I said, I think it's everybody's like duty and responsibility to sort of die to themselves and discover your essence and what it is that you're meant to share with the world and give the world. And so you make that contribution, you pour your life into this work, and then you get crucified. And you wrote, I think this is on your website, my political point of view has shifted. Yes. And become very nuanced. I have observed an environment of outrage addiction and media distortion I have become very leery of. And it would be a betrayal of my own soul not to acknowledge this. That was born out of a lot of pain.
Yes. Woo. I had to admit, I mean, there's a couple of bits in my show where I talk about, I almost foreshadow the process of being persecuted or going through this sort of heavy pain and crucifixion. And there was a part of me when it was going on, there was this feeling of I was entering a club of people who throughout history had this truth and this power that is theirs, and that is uniquely theirs, and that is their soul and their self-expression. And it's this fork in the road. And one way is you go through the motions. You know, there's a way in which you can do music, play your gig here, gig there. You're sort of this servant to the music and to the art. And you can not share what's truest to you in your heart doing that. You can be a working musician and enjoy playing music and going through the motions of playing the gig, doing the recording session, doing this thing, without ever sharing what's the deepest thing to you. And I think there's a club where you share that truth and you hit that line where you know it's going to inspire many, and then it's going to irk the demons in others. And you sign up for the club. And I feel like I had that moment like, okay, I've joined the club. Part of what I was scared of was not being that person that offends a sensibility in others, you know, because I was being the nice guy, being the good man, the nice boy, whatever. And
this trial by fire has delivered you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you said, there's a couple of things I want to read here. One thing that you said on your Instagram is the nice spiritual good boy. You're going to put him aside and not be afraid of your shadow side, which is a real troublemaker.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you had this hilarious clip of Ric Flair saying, I'm going to be obnoxious, overbearing, and I'm going to make you love it.
Yes.
Those are both kind of funny, but the one that really got to my feelings, that got me emotionally, was you singing The Reckoning. And the words are, I lovingly refuse.
Yeah.
I'm not going to slander you.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And you said you can claim your story in lieu of the mob.
Mm-hmm.
I lovingly refuse to be defined by the pain and shame of the age. It's powerful.
Whew. Yes, thank you for that. You know, sometimes that's what I wrote that song right after all that stuff happened. There's a first part to that song, and it says, you called me an abuser, and a lie was bought into, and through the pain, hurt, and heartache, all I wanted was to love, hold, and honor you. You called me a monster, more Dracula than Grover, but if I was as sweet as Elmo, you would not know, you cannot see none of the best of me. And then it frames the source of the pain that is creating the behavior. So it's like, if I could go back in time to that child you were, if she could cry on my shoulder, I would encourage her sweetness and mold it into genius but she can't hear you over her banshee scream. You say, I was your great love, but how could that be true? Perhaps you knew that my love was unconditional and could hold the worst parts of you. If I could sing you a song straight to your soul, destroying all the pain from your heart. And then it goes to the I love and me refuse part.
You can't see me because we're not using cameras, but when you were going through those words, I mean, I actually had my face in my hands. That's what I tell people a lot of times is try to see the little girl or the little boy in this person that you're dealing with, to see if you can minister to that. And it's like, sometimes it's not possible.
Yeah.
The metal's been in the microwave for too long. It's just not possible to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Yeah. You know, some ways it's like the reclaiming of something essential. More and more as I deepen and dive in, you know, I can feel the strength. I can feel the conviction that's come from that. I can feel that age-old soul question, like, you want to do this? This is what you want to do, right? Here's you, the dream of touching people's hearts, moving people, inspiring people, something you always want to do. They're about to say things that are not true and are a complete distortion and misrepresentation, and it's going to be turned up on blast, and what you're going to have is yourself. And it's going to hurt and it's going to prune, but you're going to stand in yourself. And sure enough, that's what happened. But it was... What
you just described is all the conditioning, all the lies we've ever been told, all the layers and layers. It has to be burned off. You went through the fire and you rose from the ashes.
Yes.
In this new life, this authentic self. It cost you something.
Amen.
That's the whole point of it. We have to meet in the middle. And in the middle, the only way to see each other is as a fellow living person being, and to get to that point where I'm seeing the life that you're offering. And that becomes the most important thing, not any other label or thing that the world is trying to convince us is important.
Yes.
I wondered if what you're saying is for people who are still sort of asleep, or they're kind of having a hard time understanding that they have to zoom out and start to question everything. It's going to necessitate a walk in the desert. It's going to be dry and barren. You're going to lose people. But I feel like what you're saying is it's so worth it to reclaim your life and be authentic.
Yeah, absolutely. Now there's this other call that's coming forward. I'm feeling this draw to all the stuff that all my old friends used to say was evil. like, really? But through that, I've been writing a lot of songs, and I wrote a lot of songs during that period, really heal and hold this child that I've been aware of, this sort of period of like gives more power to the cynical, the negative, the dismissive, and befriends it. And then in befriending it, loses himself and the love that he comes into the world with. I've been watching that little self not feel afraid of conflict anymore, because now I feel rooted in me.
That goes back to something else I saw that you wrote about. Your voice must flow. You were just singing with all your might. You have to learn how to use your voice without fear. When you finally tap into that authentic self, it still takes it a while to get the courage to let it out, you know?
Yeah. It's been a strange thing to observe as I continue to just trust, do the work to feel, and trust my voice. It all aligns. You know, you go through a point where it's like, look, sometimes people can hear what they can hear, but I was not afraid to express my voice. It's almost like they were not even considering the nuance, the humanity. It's like a script.
The talking points.
Yes. Watching people become parrots of a script of these talking points to the point where they don't even consider. I think one of the things that's been a growth spot for me is to just not engage. I can feel that there are these talking points. It's like a waste of energy at a time.
It's going to be an energy drain with no real payoff.
Yes. these last couple of years, I felt like this new voice has been developing and refining itself.
When I was going through your content, it almost seemed like you had a matrix moment when you realized that everything you weren't being told was true. And that kind of came like at the Grammys. And I wondered if you could tell that story.
Yes. But 2014, I was in a group that was involved in making the Macklemore album. And we went down to the Grammys. And it was an enjoyable experience. Felt good to be there. And one of the things that I noticed, it was like, even the after party with Macklemore, it was like a family hang. It was like a lot of these people from Seattle, and it was like people I came up with, and it had like this kind of chill. I mean, it was like boxes of pizza and just people hanging out, and it was a chill hang. It wasn't like a big deal. But I remember coming home and then seeing this article somebody posted. All my friends were sharing about Lorde and how Lorde gave this epic, empowered woman speech in the middle of the Grammys, and they didn't air it on TV. The TV's like cut off during the speech because she said such a powerful message, and they weren't ready to hear it. So I saw this article, and I was like, I was there, and this didn't happen. And what I saw was a very humble and grateful and shy young woman who is overwhelmed and moved by the success that she had that year. There was no dramatic speech, and yet I'm watching all these friends of mine share this article as if this really happened. And I was like, this is troublesome. It was the first time I remember being aware of like the fake article sites and humorous article sites, and sometimes you share things, but this felt different. This felt like a foreshadowing. This many people can buy into this thing that's like it seems like a powerful story to the point of can buy into anything.
Yeah. That was kind of your moment where it kind of broke open and you started to question things more.
There was like a questioning, but it was also like this, I started to give it like the skeptical eye. Signs of things kind of breaking apart and shifting were happening then, but it was more subtle. It was more subtle back then, but I definitely noticed. I was watching all these narratives that just locked people into the lowest common denominator. I'm like, what is this? The sort of proto-cancel culture.
I'm really concerned about the division. The people who are served by division or the people whose job security depends on power. You wonder, why are we so divided? Why are we cultivating such division? One thing that you said is fear, outrage, and the need to protect our image have all been used to compromise our liberty, our self-expression, and our own sovereign intuition. It feels like there has been a con to condemn those who question narratives. It's scary in a way, because if you want to break out of the mold, if you want to break out of the pack, it will involve some death, maybe relationships, or maybe to your ideals. But just like those people you were saying before when you were in that thread, all they know are talking points.
Yes.
And if you're willing to get out of your ego and go deeper and start to really allow yourself to see and question everything, that's when you can really be free.
Yes.
That's kind of been your journey.
Yes. One of the songs that I put out a year and a half ago, the title is called I'm Out. It's actually, I go and meet my friends at this bar, and I'm talking to them about the situation. A dear friend of mine throws up his hands. He's like, I'm out. And it stood out as like a moment, like a sort of point of a demarcation. There's a line in that song: when you have no one to let yourself be free. Someday I'll do this. One day I'll do this. Just starting that endeavor of like, okay, I'm choosing to be free right now. I'm choosing to express myself and express what it is I have to express right now. I always remember having this sort of, I don't know, you want to call it kumbaya image in my mind of everybody being together in this one kind of way. One of the things that gives me hope about a mind virus is that I really feel like you can be, I had the experience of some way being shooken out of we all have unique perspectives, and that's a beautiful and profound thing. But there's a difference between individuals having their unique perspectives and a kind of toxic mind virus that divides people and preys off of division in people. And my hope is that you can be shaking out the spell and almost like you go so far into the mind virus culty energy that there's a moment that happens where it's like instant snap. There's an eeriness to the division.
I agree.
Yeah.
The bottom line is that love allows.
Mm-hmm.
Love allows. I can allow you to be wrong in my presence. I can hold the space for you. You can hold the space for me to be offensive. And then we just love and we tell each other and we're impeccable with our word and we learn and grow because we're free to make mistakes and free to overlook things. And like you said, there's something so sinister about this thought policing and making everyone the same and not allowing people to express themselves. Well, I listened to the song I'm Out and I really like it. And
Thank you.
I encourage everybody to listen to it. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Angela.
Would you like to tell people where they can get in touch with you or follow you?
They can do that at Instagram at Flory-Barnes, EVFLORYBARNES. And you can also go to my my website, which is allthingsefb.com, and check out the song Paradise.
That's a really meditative piece.
Yes.
It's really beautiful.
Thank you. And then you can go to YouTube and enter Evan Flory-Barnes, I'm Out, and check it out. And then if you want to purchase it right away, you can do that. You're at your favorite online retailer, or if you want to get the funds to me directly, Bandcamp is a good way.
Well, it sure is nice to meet you, and thank you for sharing yourself here. I hope we can talk again soon.
Nice to meet you. Yes, indeed. I hope so as well. It's been very enjoyable. Thank you.